Okay, so I'm gonna talk about Blendr, and a lot of people are like, "What is Blendr?" I don't know what Blendr is. Well, I know that's probably what you're saying. I don't know what Blendr is. And Blendr is a tool that people can use to easily, not easily, but effectively 3D design and model different objects and different any of these things actually. So you can. I've seen people animate films, do visual effects. Imaging and composition, interactive 3D applications, and video games. So Blendr offers all of these, and it offers it really nicely because it's all within one application. It's free. You can get it on almost like every distro of Linux and Windows and Mac. Overall, just an excellent application, and its community is great. So right here, I have an image of just like what Blendr looks like if you were to open it up, well, minus the car that you have to do yourself. But like here's just a good example that I threw up that shows, okay, so this isn't like something that's like, oh, because it's free it's not as good. No, you can do excellent things in Blendr. I've seen amazing things, and I'll get into that later. But right here kind of shows you like the basic, just like it doesn't really show it as well as I wish it would, but it shows that there is like a single, oh actually right here, it shows that there are multiple objects associated with this one car object. And that allows a really good workflow. Just, you know, you might create like one wheel and then duplicate it 4 times or have it in an array. And I'll get into the programming aspect a little bit later. But for 3D design and modeling, it really offers a wide variety of tools, mainly in modeling. I have seen excellent sculpting done with it. It does, at least the newer releases, offer a variety of tools that allow you to deform shapes just on a brush. So they're kind of, the community is kind of pushing for development in sort of any like tablet kind of application, because they want you to be able to like open it up, use like a brush and sort of like extrude an object. Texturing is also done. However, like all applications, texturing is annoying. Blendr is no exception, but it does actually pretty okay because the community works a lot in getting these kind of features made easy for a user, so they don't like work on like, oh, how can we make this more advanced? They work on like, oh, how can we make this easier so people can, you know, produce films and applications quicker and have it make sense and make it work well. So here's like just a simple another model, but you can't really notice it here, but there is a difference in that there's a ton of regs, and right down here there's a whole panel just based on animation. And there are the Blendr community, and these 3 movies specifically are the Blendr Foundation movies. And so there's a lot of work into making Blendr a really excellent application for making movies. In addition to this, I've seen people use Blendr for visual effects, which I'll get into a little bit later. But these are fully animated movies using the Blendr Foundation focuses on free software, so virtually like recreatable by anybody, except they have a whole team working on it for like, for funds and donations, and they get, that's what they do. These are actually in sequential order of when they were released. I'll say for right now that Big Buck Bunny is probably the most famous and successful one. If you look at any VLC, like, oh, what can VLC do, for example, you'll see Big Buck Bunny, because it was a very nicely rendered movie. And a lot of these actually inspired different developments within the Blendr community. I know for a fact that when the team was working on Elephant's Dream, they were like, we need a way to generate hair. So the Blendr community was like, let's generate hair particles, and then they did it. So there's a lot of focus on getting just between smaller and larger projects done. Going on, continuing with nicely developed things. They have a really nice composition tool that allows you, they do use a lot of terms that sometimes are more computer science, but I've seen upcoming with new renderers, they kind of focus on a photography kind of sense. So it doesn't show it here, but they do have Oh, well, they kind of show up, but it's too blurry for you guys to see clearly. But they do have a lot of tools that reference a lot of photography terms. But then they also have terms that relate to, Z depth, as far as like where the focusing should be. So obviously this has like a simple model associated to it, but then there's a lot of composition that goes into making the image look as good as it does to get the metal looking like this without having to do each and itty bitty detail. And you can do very realistic looking renders. If that's not your thing, you can do kind of cartoony looking renders, and you can make a Pixar almost looking like animation. So there's a large variety that that is offered when using Blender. The last two, this one and the last one, more reference what renderer you're using. And rendering, for those of you who don't know, is basically taking an image and then saying, make it look pretty with the lights and stuff. So a lot of people, have developed certain renderers for Blender. The most popular one and the one that comes with the Blender trunk right now is called Cycles, and it's amazing. So I love it. Yeah, I do have a YouTube link, but I'm not going to show it to you guys, because I'm mean. But basically, in one of the branches, they have really silly branch names, the Tomato branch, a group of people working on Google Summer of Code decided to develop motion tracking for Blender. So now you can go in and, if you Google this, Tomato branch motion tracking testing. Basically, one of the tests they did was, okay, I'm gonna have like a really shaky camera, and this 3D model is gonna like sit on the table, and it looks, magnificent. They have like a portal. This link sends you to like a scene where they have a portal gun sitting on a table. After this branch was released, you could find about like 50 videos of people shaking cameras crazily, and like, look, the 3D object stays where it's supposed to stay. And like, that's really cool. Why is everyone shaking their camera so much? So here's a screen that I grabbed from the game, Yo Frankie. So Blender allows a lot of variety in game creation, game generation. Whether you're making like a simple game for first-person shooters, or you're making like a vast world and you have a Super Mario World, Super Mario 64 like platformer. You can develop it. You can create the world. I've seen people do some 2D, 2.5D kind of games. So like working only in 2 planes. And I've seen a lot of stuff done in 3D. And usually 3D works nicer because they do have a lot of physics in there that you can just click on an object. Oh, I want this to be, a hard body or a soft body. Some of this, I don't know what specifically those terms mean, because I worked on games like a little bit, and I was like, this stuff is not exactly what I want to do in Blender. Me personally, I focus on modeling. But yeah, and if you're not into the whole platformer, some people have worked really hard on getting like really cool racing games. As you can see, like they implemented their own kind of interface that shows you all the details. And Blender offers those kind of tools, and it's really nice at doing so. Again, I haven't worked too much in the games, but like I really enjoy using Blender for any kind of thing I do. For the longest time, I was using it instead of Photoshop, because the image compositing just made more sense and it worked better for what I was doing specifically. But for other people, it can't do all the things Photoshop can do, obviously. Yeah, and okay, so yeah, that's it. But if you guys have any questions, you can ask me. And just to finish off, Blender is a really excellent tool, and I use it as often as I can. The specifications for using Blender are actually quite low, so you can like download it on any computer. And there are different tools to download on even lower end like netbooks and such. It's a really amazing tool, and people will come in, when you go into it, they'll tell you, it's really hard to learn. Not as hard as it was maybe 2 or 3 years ago, where the learning curve was like, whomp, but now it's still a little bit difficult. The best way to learn that I found is going to a website like Blender Guru or Blender Cookie, and they kind of give you advice. all in all, it's an excellent tool, and I use it whenever I can because it's just wonderful at what it does, and it's free. So, yeah, I'll be taking questions now. So, Jesse, I saw your hand up first. So I know in Blender you can do scripting. What language would you do that in? So, I was going to go into this, but I didn't have a slide for it, so I kind of forgot. There is a lot of scripting that you can do. Blender mostly runs, it's developed in C, but you can write code for it in Python. There's a lot of people who do, so there's not a lot of people that code for Blender in Python, but it's doable. All the objects are there, so and available. So they actually have like a Python interpreter inside the Blender interface. So you can just say, oh, you know, print dirt, and then it'll print out dirt in the interface inside. Or you can be like, oh, you know, create an array list, create like an array of cubes, and then like make them all the material colored metal. You know, if you predefine a metal material, so you can do a lot of development with Blender to create like an entire scene. A lot of the functions are already there. Like if you want to make like an array of lights, they have like pre-built modules. But I've also seen development in modules for Blender. So if you want to say, oh, I want to do this kind of like macro thing like every single time, just develop your own tool. There are guides how to do that online, but I've never really explored it myself. Yeah, more?
I just wanted to mention there actually is a 4th Blender Foundation film that came out very recently.
Yes, okay, so there is a new one that just came out recently, I don't know when, but it's, what is it, Tears of
Steel?
Tears of Steel. Okay, so Tears of Steel, look it up. I haven't looked it up myself, so I didn't want to mention it, because I should have. But, yeah, it's a new one that came out. I'm actually looking forward to it, because they always, good quality animations that kind of blow my mind. They are excellent, and there are each about 15 minutes long. Elephant's Dream is kind of weird and more of a test, so don't go into it looking up Elephant's Dream and being like, oh, what's this movie about? I don't get, because for them it was more like, can we accomplish a 15-minute short? Actually, a neat little fact, with the tools that they had, because the Blender Foundation was just starting off, it took them, I think, a day to render each frame of that movie because it's such high quality. They really put a lot of work into what they do, and they produce really high quality stuff. So I'm looking forward to watching that short as soon as I get time. Yeah.
Just wondering, because I know there are some cases when free software is just as good as the software that you pay for, and there are plenty of cases where that isn't true. How would you say Blender compares to professional paid software for these sort of things, like from Autodesk, for example?
Yeah. Okay, so when comparing Blender to Autodesk, it's not as much whether one can do better than the other. It's more of, okay, so with the exception of Mudbox, which can, to my knowledge, do sculpting like amazingly, and Blender's sculpting tools are pretty much crap. I don't want to diss Blender, but honestly, like, they could put more resources into developing sculpting tools. But Autodesk, if you want to create a cell phone and you want to model it like to the if you happen to have the design specs in your hand, so you could say, oh, this is about this far and this is about that far, and these two sides are flush, then Autodesk is going to do everything you need. Blender's kind of like units. Whatever. Because it doesn't really have a focus on, oh, these two things are this far apart. I mean, you can kind of grab any vertex and just throw it off the map. In that sense, I really like Blender, because I don't like to say, oh, I'm modeling a dragon design. How far away is its tooth from the back of its jaw, And there's a lot of... while I generally use the beta, and other releases of Blender that aren't so stable, I tend to see less problems with it than I do in Autodesk. Because when I was using Autodesk, I tried to, I don't want this side to be curved anymore, and the whole thing would just say, no, Ethan, you can't do that, and I'm like, but I want to. So Blender offers a little bit more freedom as far as whether you can. Autodesk is just better for if you're designing something from a spec sheet and you know what you're doing. You can still do that in Blender. In fact, I've seen branches of Blender mimic like certain unit like details, like, oh, you know, this the specific like inventor like Blender branch is made to hold millions upon millions of more objects than the standard Blender scene, and it's able to do a lot more with unit specifications. So there are branches out there that are more specified for, you know, either rendering, animating, or just modeling something off of a spec sheet. But Blender itself is not Autodesk, and it shows when you use the program.
I just want to say on that note, if you ask people, a lot of people will advise against using Blender just because it's not the, you know, the industry standard, but it's really nice if you don't want to shell like the, I don't know how much like Inventor or Maya or any of those applications cost. It's a really nice way to get into 3D modeling and animation or anything like that, and if you're just a hobbyist, it might not be really worth it to pay however much you want to just get your, you know, feet into the field.
Yeah, going on with that, a lot of people who do, you know, hobby like 3D modeling will generally point more towards, you know, if they have a career in it, they own Maya. If they don't, you'll see a lot of people using Blender just to get their feet and hands wet, because it is kind of a, you know, wet, dirty, whatever. Just because they see there's a lot that Blender is doing to kind of match that industry standard. But it's not there yet. And there's a multitude of reasons why, because, you know, there's a lot of tools that still don't make sense. There's a lot of functionality that isn't perfected. It's a stable release, they're out there, but they're not consistent. And, you know, without a price tag, Blender kind of seems, you know, oh, it's free software, so it can't be that good. But I've seen amazing stuff done, so, I don't know, it depends. Yeah, Nick?
In terms of ease of use, how would you compare Blender and other similar proprietary software?
So, as far as ease of use, I mean, you go into Autodesk, like, my experience with 3D modeling software is that, actually, my experience with software in general is that if you spend a couple of days with it and then you know, work towards getting it to look nice, just going into it and, you know, seeing what it can do, you get more out of that than any kind of, you know, whether it's actually difficult or not. Autodesk, like, comparing it with, like, Autodesk Inventor and stuff, Autodesk has a lot more tutorials that are updated and recent and won't show you the old interface. If you try to look up a Blender tutorial that's more than a year and a half to 2 years old, then you're gonna find someone talking about, you know, rigging a model, but they're gonna be showing something to you that isn't anything like your screen. So, to get into Blender, you're kind of on your own unless you know someone else. That's one of the big problems. That's why whenever I do anything, I have to like heavily resource myself into, you know, 1 or 2 websites, make sure everything I'm looking at is updated, because they change a lot of stuff really quickly. So ease of use is kind of dependent on whether you're more in, you know, following a tutorial, in which case you're gonna have to follow a, you know, a recent one and hope that it's for, you know, your kind of level. Otherwise, you're kind of, you know, doing it yourself kind of works out better for Blender. But, you know, that depends on what you're doing. If you're scripting stuff and you already know programming, bam, you're in there. If you're modeling and you're trying to find out the hotkey for everything, you might be kind of stuck. So, yeah.
On that note, as far as programming in Blender, if you hover over any of the buttons or any of the functions, it tells you the method call in Python to run it. So that's really, really useful when you want to duplicate some of the functionality. It's really, really nice.
True.
Really, really it's super fun too.
Any more questions? Alright. Well, thank you guys.